webinar pods and polls throughout the session. And then you'll also, as always, be asked to complete an evaluation. So just want to make sure everyone can see where that green arrow is. That's your chat pod. And then you'll see a little man in the corner of each slide. And so if you have to leave early from the webinar, please go ahead and click the icon so you can complete, the evaluation, because we want your feedback and we use your feedback. So in order to participate in today's webinar, you will use the chat pod. Again, you can submit questions or comments at any time, and myself or Marcella or Ruth will get back to you. You can use this for both content as well as requesting technical assistance. The responses to the content questions will be shared along with the recording of the webinar. We'll be using multiple polls throughout today. So some are multiple choice and some are short answer. And we will also be using breakout rooms. So this is a very interactive webinar, so that's why we just want to make sure that everyone is connected. You can also send private messages to the host if you have any questions. On the top of your screen, you'll see an icon with the hand raised. And there you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand, agree or disagree, or ask me or anyone else to speak louder or softer, or you can laughter and applause in there. So if you can just give that a try by selecting any of the icons at the top of your screen. Okay, see some coming through. Great. Excellent. All right, fantastic. And as I said, this is a very interactive webinar, so feel free to use those icons as you'd like. So before we really dig in, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Condelli, the NRS Project Director, who will give you a brief overview and welcome of today's session. Larry, are you on the phone?
Sorry, I had it muted.
Okay, I figured.
Sorry.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for attending. I'm not going to say more than just a welcome, and also let you know that this is one of 4 Train the Training webinars we have planned for this year. It's kind of a new service we're providing under the NRS project. Each webinar is designed to go around a specific tool, and you can use that tool for providing information to other staff in your state, local providers, or other state staff. So there'll be a number of resources available, and then the webinar is designed to help you use the tool. And we've also would like them to be very interactive. And so we ask for your active participation today and in future webinars. Okay, so again, thank you very much. We'll be hearing more later at the end of the webinar. I'll talk about some future topics we have planned. But for now, I hope you enjoy the webinar and find it useful, and I'll turn it back to Amanda.
Thanks, Larry. All right, so I will give you a brief overview of our agenda. So we will review the LEAP training material, and this is LEAP 1 and LEAP 2. We'll give you an opportunity to assess your training preparedness. We'll do a content and layout review of the actual toolkits, and then we'll really spend a bulk of our time talking about how to use the toolkit to train local providers and supporting you in your planning. We'll do a brief share out and then wrap up. And as Larry mentioned, we will talk about upcoming webinars and tools from NRS. So that being said, we are going to move to our first poll to ask you about how you're feeling about your training preparedness. So there are 3 questions. You can respond once to each of them. So we'll just give you about 30 seconds to a minute to complete this. Great. I see a lot of responses coming in, and I'm happy to say that many of you are prepared to move forward. And for those of you who are not sure or disagree, hopefully this session will give you that added confidence and readiness to move forward. Great. About 5 more seconds, and then we are going to close the poll. Okay, fantastic. So we will stop accepting responses now. But a lot of you are not sure about how to use the training toolkit, which is great because this will be a good use of your time. And then hopefully through that exploration of how to use the toolkit, you'll find additional resources for yourself to help you brush up on and deepen your understanding of the NRS table changes. Okay, so I'm going to clear these results from this screen and move on. So during your last webinar that Marcella facilitated, many of you talked about things that you're already doing. So I just kind of wanted to start off this session by highlighting all of the training that you're already doing in your state and to serve as a reminder of the various ways that you can disseminate this information and train your locals on the NRS table changes. So many of you are sharing charts and visuals, you're doing webinars and summits, you're developing your own quick guides and creating some examples and scenarios, as well as developing series of videos. So keep all of this in mind as we're moving forward and looking at each part of the toolkit. So for each of our LEAP trainings, LEAP 1, which was in June of 2016, and LEAP 2, which was in September and October, we developed a companion toolkit. So within the toolkit, you'll find materials and handouts from the training, as well as supplemental handouts and resources for further reading and exploration. These materials were intended for adult education staff to extend their learning and to understand the topics, as well as to provide materials for working with both state and local program staff. So we've created this toolkit in an electronic format to enable the ease of sharing and printing. So if you have not already downloaded the documents, I know we had some difficulty sending them because the files are large. I want to point out our toolkit document. If you can see where the green arrow is, you'll have the LEAP 1 toolkit, the LEAP 2 toolkit, as well as a worksheet that you can use during the training today. So I just want to give you about 1 minute to click on each of them and then click download. So you'll have them available on your computer to use during the breakout rooms and as we go through some examples. Once you've downloaded the file, if you could raise your hand and let me know, that would be helpful so I can judge the time. All right, we've got a lot of people already downloaded. Great, thank you. Però non so che sta passando. Okay, I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds. See, almost half of you have been able to download it or already have it open on your computer.
Yo lo tengo. Sí, está bien, gracias.
Okay, so for those of you who were able to download the material and raise your hand, you can go ahead and lower your hand. And if you are having any trouble accessing the documents, please reach out to either Marcella or Ruth in a private chat, and they can help you download that. Okay, so I want to go over how the toolkit is organized. Now, this is the same for both the LEAP 1 or Part 1 and Part 2 of the toolkit. So the materials are all grouped by topic, which you can search through the table of contents. Each of the sections contains background information for the understanding of the topic, followed by worksheets or activities for use within your state team or with your local providers. Some of these materials were used in the face-to-face training. Others are modified from the original format to include additional information and links to external resources. Each of the topical sections will then include suggestions of modification to use the tools or activities with other in the state office, your local program staff, or even adult education stakeholders such as other government agencies, businesses, or community partners that you're collaborating with. Throughout the documents, you'll notice tips, questions for thoughts, and links to additional information. Again, the purpose here is to provide opportunities to deepen your thinking and to help you in sharing the information with other staff. We recommend that you review all of the topics in the toolkit. The documents are quite large, but we think that each of them is necessary for creating that systematic change that we're looking for. We've arranged the materials in an order that seems most logical to use. However, the way the sections are set up is that they're set up in a module-like format that allows you to select which areas to focus on and in which order you would prefer to focus on. So again, you can download the documents from the Toolkit pod right above the chat. Does anybody have any questions about how the toolkit is organized? You can raise your hand, you can type in the chat pod. Okay. So what's in the LEAP Toolkit Part 1? All of the materials in Part 1 come from LEAP 1 from the summer of 2016. So these contents really focus on understanding and preparing for systemic change, leading through the system change, approaches to data system and reporting changes, and communicating change to stakeholders. There's an additional appendix that has tools around communication as well. So before I open up the poll, I just want to ask if I'm making an assumption that you are more interested and are more likely to use the LEAP 2 toolkit information, which focuses on the tables. Is that correct? Can you raise your hand if that's correct? Okay, that's coming in pretty quickly, so I'm going to say yes. Thank you. You can lower your hands. And now we're just going to pull up a poll regarding your priority area. So we have the 4 topic areas that are in the Part 1 of the toolkit. So which of those do you feel that your local providers need information and guidance on? And I'll give you a few minutes to complete that. Not a few minutes, about 1 minute. Okay, so it looks like the responses have stopped coming in, and we have a nice balance between preparing for change, leading through change, and communicating on one side, and approaches to data system and reporting changes on the other. Great. Thank you. So you'll find information about all of those topics within the LEAP Toolkit Part 1. So we've also sent you a training worksheet that you can use to kind of take some notes as you go through this process with us in some of your responses. So you can go ahead and add your priority area to the worksheet. And then take a look at the LEAP 1 toolkit. And just take a look at the table of contents and note what pages your priority area is focused on. And I'll give you about 1 to 2 minutes to do this. Once you've jotted down your priority area and you've found the page numbers in the table of contents, go ahead and just give me a smiley face or raise your hand.
Approaches to data systems and reporting channels. Okay.
Okay, great. So you can go ahead and lower your hand. I appreciate you doing that. I'm just going to move on, but I do encourage you to make sure you note the page numbers within the table of contents. We'll have more time to look around the toolkit in a few minutes. But as many of you indicated, you're very interested in the contents of Part 2 of the LEAP toolkit. And here is really where we're focusing on understanding the revised NRS system, defining some of these key elements for reporting, where we provide some practical scenarios for addressing the needs of local providers, as well as an appendix of tools. So here again is where we're focusing largely on the key elements and the changes. So I'm going to have you do the same thing you did for Part 1 and identify what is the priority area. So you can select only one from the LEAP Part 2. We've got a lot of responses coming in with a huge percentage of the priority being understanding periods of participation. Okay, so it looks like the responses have stopped. So I'll give you just a second to take a look at that. But again, understanding periods of participation really seems to be the priority for your state, as well as a few mixed in here and there with MSG, participant follow-up credential indicators, new employment and earning indicators, and some of the intake changes. So we're going to remove that poll from the screen and just give you just a minute or so to use your worksheet and note your priority, and then look at the table of contents in part 2 of the toolkit and note the page numbers. Where is that priority area located within the toolkit? So I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute to do that. And then once you're done, please raise your hand or give me a smiley face. Okay, we've got a lot of people raising their hands. Do about 15 more seconds. Great. Okay. Great. Thank you to those of you who have raised your hand. You can go ahead and lower them, and we'll talk about how to use the toolkit to train locals. So in developing the toolkit and thinking about what would be most helpful for you, we thought that including the presentation slides and resources and various links, as well as activities and planning handouts, would be the most helpful. So how you would use that toolkit would be to select and combine, and then refine or personalize. So what materials do you want to use? What materials do you need to use? But then how you use them or how you refine them is completely up to you. So you might add some state-specific scenarios. You might make the training format appropriate. Our training was face-to-face, and it was very long. We had 3 full days, but we recognize that you will not have all of that time to cover each of the topics. So you can select from a variety of resources within each of the toolkits or each parts of the toolkits, and you can explore those resources and links that we've included that expand upon some of the topics. And then you can refine and personalize. So how can you make it your own? How can you modify the scenarios or the slides so that they really speak to your local providers? So we just want to hear from you and understanding what is your primary training delivery format. So Marcella is going to pull up some polls for us, and what you'll do is you'll type your state underneath the format. But you'll have to click the arrow next to where you type your answer in order to submit. So what is your primary training delivery format? Is it a webinar? Do you use videos, face-to-face, blended, primarily email or newsletter, or other? And remember to please hit submit after you've typed your response in.
And your response should be your state's name.
Thanks, Marcella.
Yep.
So I see a lot of answers coming in, so I recommend that for those of you who are, your primarily training delivery format is a webinar, to use the scroll bar on the right of that poll box to see what other states, which other states are using that same format. And then write that down on your worksheet, because there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration or some sharing of ideas. And you can do the same for each of the format methods on your screen.
And if you do add something to other, if you could please also include the state you're from so that people who are interested about that format can reach out to you.
Okay, so if everyone, I think I've just been muted. So if you could raise your hand after you've noted the other states who are also using the same primary training format, or even one that you're interested in using more. Again, this is about collaboration and how can you work together to get this information out. And I see a question about blended. So what we mean by blended is a combination of some face-to-face and some online learning. So that might look like a 2-hour workshop, 1-hour webinar. It will vary. Okay, I see some hands raised. Okay. So if you've raised your hand, thank you. You can go ahead and lower your hands, and we will clear the poll results. But this is also something that if you were not able to write it all down, we can certainly share with you. So next, what I'd like to do is go through a full example of how I would use the toolkit from part 1 and part 2 for periods of participation. And I encourage you to ask questions throughout the explanation, because you're going to duplicate this process when you go into your breakout rooms for other areas. Excuse me. Okay, so the way that we have this organized is that we selected 3 different format, delivery format options. So we have face-to-face, a webinar, and then a newsletter. So we selected the topic of periods of participation to give you an example of what we might do. So the top part, the first part, is that select and combine. So I really have to know what's inside the toolkit so I know what I can do with it and how I can modify it for my audience. So when I look at the toolkit part 2, I can see on pages 11 through 13, we have defining key elements of NRS reporting. And within that, I see about 1.5 to 2 pages of the summary of what a participant is and what periods of participation are. So something that I can do with that is I can copy it directly from the toolkit and use it either as a handout or as part of my training. Then I looked through the PowerPoint slides, and I discovered that there were 3 different sections throughout the LEAP 2 training that really focused in on participants and periods of participation. There were also 3 handouts that were appropriate to help locals and others really understand and dig into periods of participation. There are training scenarios on page 15 and 16. So I know that I'll have to read through those because we use them throughout the training, so we try to connect, as you might have remembered, Tony and Angela in the LEAP trainings, where we kind of went through their whole process and what each of the changes for the NRS tables might look like for that one participant's circumstances. So something that you might do in the refine and personalize column is to modify those scenarios so they're more representative of experiences that students have in your state or within a particular program that you're familiar with. On page 7 of the toolkit, there's also a link to the Jeopardy game. Now, you don't necessarily have to use that exact game, but it is an idea of something that you can modify or make content specific for any of the trainings that you're delivering. But I don't want to forget about LEAP 1 because a lot of the pieces in there, while that seemed to have happened a really long time ago, is still very relevant because we still need strong communication skills and change management, and the local providers need support within that change because they have to support their teachers and their data collectors and their program administrators. So I do want to make sure that I use pages 5 through 10 and 42 to 46 in the LEAP 1 or Part 1 toolkit to help me at least frame how I'm discussing change and how I'm approaching change. And the same thing is true for the communication slides. And those are found on pages 22 through 25 and 90 through 95 of the Part 1 of the LEAP toolkit. So when I think about, those are all of the resources and everything that is available within the toolkit, just focusing on participants and periods of participation. So I'm going to show you what it looks like for the webinar and the newsletter, but to say when you're focusing on one topic, really comb through it, and there's a lot of features. It's linked with the table of contents, and we also have the search function where you can search the PDF and find where are all the materials that are connected to this that I can refine and personalize. So thinking about all of the materials I've selected, how might I refine or personalize? And this will look different for me and for each of the states, but just to give you some general ideas. You can use the slides as is. If you feel comfortable using the ones that we've developed, you can use them as they are. You can add state-specific scenarios or replace our scenarios with state-specific scenarios. We have ideas for modification next to the training activities that we completed. You can either use the activities that we designed as is, again, or modify them so they're appropriate to the amount of time you have and your audience. And each state has state-specific requirements. So that's something where you would have to build upon what already exists within the toolkit. And then including a game as part of the training with the example of the Jeopardy that we shared with you during the training. So I'm going to do the same thing, not in as much detail, with the webinar and the newsletter to show you how it might look differently. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions or comments about how to use the toolkit for Part 1 and Part 2? I don't see anybody typing just yet, but maybe that is because you're thinking about this because it's a lot of information. So I just want to give you, again, just a couple of minutes to ask any questions you might have about this process and how you can use the toolkit. Oh, Priscilla, thank you for asking that. In your, included in the worksheet is this full example, so you do not need to write all of this down. Okay, now I'm just going to move to the example in the context of a webinar. Again, the same topic, so participants and periods of participation, and looking at what it might look like for the webinar. So I'm not going to talk about what's on the left-hand side of the table, the select and combine, because this is exactly the same as the materials that were identified for the face-to-face extended training. But how you refine and personalize will look differently because you have a much shorter period of time and you don't have the benefit of, that was a bias on my part, of being face-to-face and seeing people and being able to get up and do some activities. So what you might do is actually use that two-page summary of what participants and periods of participation are on pages 11 and 13 and provide it to participants prior to the webinar as a pre-reading. So they have some background knowledge prior to coming in and have time to really think about it and prepare some questions for you. Obviously, you cannot use all of those slides, so you would have to select just a few. And of course, you could modify and refine them and create your own. Similar to the face-to-face training, creating your own state-specific scenarios and adding your state-specific requirements around the individual topic will help you. You can use the communication slides to help guide how you're presenting and how you're speaking about periods of participation within a webinar. So that LEAP 1 material is still really valuable in help guiding how you prepare. And then some of the handouts as well as some of the links that we've provided in the toolkit can be used as extra resources. And then finally, what this might look like if you're using a newsletter. You've got a lot of materials and you've really got to whittle it down, but that doesn't mean that you can't link. So you can link to parts of the toolkit that participants can take a look at. You can summarize the slides and use any of the visuals from the slides to aid in that communication. Of course, allowing space for questions or reactions. Many of you have said this has been really valuable in conducting your webinars or sharing emails and newsletters, is having a space for people to send in questions to you. And again, sharing possible link to a game, or you could create your own version of the Jeopardy game or something that's interactive that participants can really dig into the content. So this is how we're envisioning that you use the toolkit to help support your local providers. We've given this to you in the sense of the face-to-face webinar and a newsletter, but we know that there are multiple other avenues for sharing this information and training your local providers on this information. So you can refine and personalize in any way that makes the most sense to you and your state's needs. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share before we move on? Okay. So we've talked a bit about audience and having to modify messages from the same content to your different audiences. So we'd like to hear from you about what successful strategies you've used to tailor your message to specific audiences, such as teachers or administrators or anyone else. What strategies have you used? So we have a chat pod open, and you can go ahead and share one or two of your successful strategies. So Kim mentions the State PD Center. So Kim, I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about that, and what does the center do specifically to target these audiences? Becky, that's a great point about using specific scenarios with teachers because they can connect it to, they can make it personal. Great. Sean, can you say a little bit more about how you've used the materials and what you were able to create with them? Great. Kathleen, you're using PLCs. That's fantastic. Have you used PLCs in your states before, Kathleen? I'm also seeing some regular meetings happening, which is great, right? Because something that you all have mentioned in the past has been this bite-sized building blocks out to state. So that's fantastic to see that you have some regularly scheduled meetings happening. All right, so I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds, maybe a minute. I see multiple people are typing to share some of the strategies that you've used to tailor the materials to different audiences. More PLCs, fantastic. Rosemary, I like that collaboration that you have. Be curious to see what the responses are and the results. So presenting policy and procedure, and then demonstrating the data process. Great.
Hey, Amanda. Oh, sorry. Before we wrap up, we had a question in the chat pod.
Okay.
If you can take a look, it asks, from the training implementation slide discussing POP, did you identify if the handouts were from LEAP 1 or LEAP 2, or is it from the toolkit?
Yep, it's in part 2 of the toolkit.
Thanks.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for sharing some of these strategies. These are all things to keep in mind as we move into our breakout rooms and we are discussing and sharing some different opportunities for how to refine and personalize the training materials. So I'm going to close this chat, but I continue to keep using the chat for everyone in the right-hand side of your screen. So we're going to move on to get you into some breakout rooms. This is going to give you the opportunity to really dig into the toolkit and talk with other folks on the call and share some ideas for how to use the materials for training. So I'm going to give you a sense of what the breakout sessions will look like, what you'll be tasked to do, and just to let you know up front that you'll have one of us from the NRS team within the room helping you out should you need it. So you are going to automatically be assigned a breakout room. Each room will focus on one assigned training topic. What you'll do is you'll brainstorm and develop kind of a loose outline for the training. So what the example that we gave you for the face-to-face, the webinar, and the newsletter that really went through and decided, okay, where is all the material in the toolkit that I need, and then how will I use it? So once we've completed the webinar, we will compile those tables that you complete in your breakout rooms and share with everyone on the call. Now this way everyone will have kind of a lot of the upfront work and a lot of ideas generated that you can then take and start building out. So your tasks. You'll complete a list of materials that are relevant to your topic from the toolkit. I really encourage you to use page numbers and document titles if possible, or section header titles. And then try to identify at least 2 ways to refine and personalize the material for the different delivery formats. So this is what the breakout room will look like. It's all set up, and you'll see here on the screen, this one is for a credential indicator. And the first column is for face-to-face delivery. The second column is for the webinar, and the third column is for the newsletter. There's a space to add materials and page numbers, keeping in mind that you can do exactly what we did and copy those materials to the webinar and the newsletter sections. It's not a task that you have to do 3 times, just a task that you have to do once. And then there's space available where you can include the suggested activities. You'll see to the right of the red box, that's where you have a chat just for your breakout room. So you can talk to the people either verbally, because you will be unmuted, or within the chat pod. If you have a question, like I said, Marcella, myself, Ruth, and Myra will be in the rooms, but you can type a message to us in the box below, above the chat pod. and it says send message to host. So what we'd like you to do when you enter your breakout room is to assign one note taker. And that one note taker will be the person responsible for copying and pasting from the chat or listening and typing what is being said verbally within this space. Now, more than one person can actually type, but we think that having one note taker will help to reduce some of the duplication and confusion. Excuse me. And also, please select one representative to share out from your group. Now, we're not going to ask you to read the whole thing or tell us each of the page numbers. Rather, we'll have you share some of the 1 or 2 activities that you came up with as a group for that particular topic. Your audio will automatically be on, and if you're not speaking, try to just be mindful of that, and you can do that by pressing mute on your phone or *6 and #6 to unmute. We'll send out some blast messages to you, giving you a 5-minute warning and a 1-minute warning. But again, folks from the team will be in the room helping you out.
And one more thing, sorry, Amanda, before we go to the rooms, I wanted to remind you that if you called in and if you scroll down to the bottom of the attendance list and you see your phone number there, it is possible that your phone and your person or your visual will go to separate rooms. So just to be aware that that is a confusion that might come up.
Thanks, Marcella. Okay, so we are going to automatically put you into a breakout room, and you'll know that you're in there when the screen changes and you start hearing a lot of different voices that are not mine. You'll have approximately 20 to 25 minutes within the breakout room. So are there any questions before we move you over? And as questions come up, we'll be in the room to help you, or you can send a message to the host.
Sorry, and one more thing. For those of you who end up in breakout room 3, I'm going to be joining you just a couple of minutes late. I'm going to check in with breakout room 1 to make sure that they're all set, and then I'll be popping into your room as well. So just be a little patient.
Thanks, Marcella. Okay, well then I think we can go ahead and automatically assign folks to the room and start the breakout room.
Yeah, I think so.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hi, this is Joanne. I'm trying to do breakout room 2.
I was thinking this was 3.
Okay.
Yeah, this is breakout room 3, I think, but I haven't heard anyone speak.
Okay. I take that back. I'm breakout 5, I think. But I just called in. I had been in listen-only mode.
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah, that may have thrown things off.
All right.
I'm not hearing anything from this breakout.
I am going to go back on mute.
I hear me too.
Okay, so it looks like everybody is being moved from their breakout rooms back to the main room. So I want to give everyone a chance to get in, and then we will move on. There's lots of beeps, so we're going to try to mute your phones as you are entering back into the room. Adrian, thanks so much. If you have time, please complete the evaluation by clicking on the icon in the corner. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so it looks like everybody is back in the main room, and we're going to do just a brief debrief of what you did in the breakout room. I know that there were some technical oddities that happened, so I appreciate all of your patience and for all of the teams for plugging away and talking and chatting. I was able to go into all of the rooms and hear some of your conversations, so thank you for that. So we'll have each group share at least one highlighted activity or resource and how they might use it for their topic. And remember, we're going to be collecting these and compiling one document that at least gets you started in helping you to outline your training. So I'm just going to, you should all have assigned a presenter. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask group one to share just a bit about what you talked about and the activity or resource that you highlighted. Wow, you've got quite a bit. So if I can have the speaker for group one, go ahead and share.
We got the breakout room shut down before we had our opportunity to have a speaker volunteer.
Oh, okay.
So, but we had a rich discussion in our group, and I don't know if someone else wants to speak. Maybe Laura, if you want to, you can unmute your phone. But we had a lot of good ideas. One thing we were focused on was the intake changes, and Laura made a good suggestion about coming up with a pilot of the intake process and having just a couple programs do it and get their feedback. And she also described that it was a very thoughtful, intensive process that they went through first before they developed the intake form to figure out what questions people had, what to focus on, and then they piloted it with some programs. So that wasn't specific to these categories, but it seemed like an innovative process.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And so it looks like you got quite deep into the toolkit and was able to identify a lot of page numbers where specific information would be around intake changes and provided multiple opportunities or suggestions for activities. So thank you to Breakout Group 1, and thank you for keeping your response under your 2 minutes. We can close these out and open up Breakout 2 and have a speaker from that group share. And I'll just say, you know, some of these will be less filled out than others. A lot of people were having some really great conversations and may not have completed the chart in time. So someone from Breakout Group 2 who was assigned to discuss the topic. And really we just want to hear, just like Ruth did, a little bit of a summary and some highlights of materials you might have found or what you would like to do. Okay, so since I was in this room for a little while, I do want to point out Sean had a really great idea because we were specifically focusing on new employment and earning indicators in Breakout Room 2. But Sean said, you know, but what about the vision slides? What about the vision materials as well as, you know, some of the overall format of the training? So really making sure that you use those slides either that you create or from the toolkit that give the big picture, before focusing in on the details. So if nobody from group 2 has anything additional, we can move on to group 3.
Amanda, it looks like some people are having trouble hearing, and I'm not sure why. They're having trouble with the audio. Just to let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if somebody did want to volunteer and just you're muted and you're not sure how to unmute yourself, if you'll just type your name or type a message into the chat pod, we can make sure that you are unmuted.
Okay, let's bring up group 3, just so we can do the report out. So do we have a volunteer, someone who was assigned as the presenter from group 3? Okay, I'm just going to take a look, and if someone from group 3 wants to jump in, please do. So this group focused on credential indicator and found multiple spots within the toolkit with the page numbers. I really like what they're saying in their webinar column about creating pre-recorded and on-demand webinars. We know repetition is key when we're talking about new information, so having those on-demand webinars is a great idea. And yes, North Dakota, we're going to put this all together for you and send you one single document, so you'll have access to all of these. And again, just highlighting from this group that I was not in, but creating the newsletter, but doing it bi-weekly, so that regular access and exposure to information is very helpful. Okay, can we move to breakout 4? And I believe someone did actually volunteer that when I was on the phone, I believe for group breakout group 4, if they can go ahead and share as Marcella pulls up your chat pods that you completed. No? Okay. If someone from group 4 changes your mind, please go ahead and jump in. I'm just going to give a brief summary. But you see a lot of materials found within the toolkit that can be used, and one of the suggested activities was to use a large blank calendar and have the participants use Post-it notes with student names on them to talk about as one way of understanding follow-up, which I think is really cool. It gets them up and moving and creates a nice visual. And then this actually came up in another room about terms and vocabulary. And so creating a crossword puzzle with some of these different terms might just be a fun way to help get that information out and get people engaged in the process. So thank you, group 4, for these ideas. We're going to move to group 5. And group 5, I believe, the focus was MSG. And so again, similar to the other ones, you have multiple areas within the toolkit and the page numbers that can be used to support the training within these content areas. There was a discussion of showing a side-by-side of the old tables versus new tables, and doing something, a scavenger hunt, with some pre-work for those new to the field about MSG. So those are a couple of ideas around MSG, including scenarios for addressing the needs of the local providers, which is really key. And you brought that up a lot in the LEAP 1 and 2 trainings about state-specific examples. So thank you all so much for your work again, and thank you for your patience with the technology. But I think overall that went really well. There were a lot of great conversations around the materials and how to get it out there. So again, thank you for your time and for putting those together. Once you've done the trainings, what do you do? And you even mentioned some of this in your activity ideas around the webinars, but the need to provide access to those trainings for people who are unable to attend, and the need for repetition. With change and new information, we need to hear it over and over again so we can hear it in different ways and have different types of questions. So I just wanted to highlight a few states that shared what they do around storing information and sharing information around these WIOA changes. So this is Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. So if you're interested in learning more about what they are doing, please go ahead and reach out to them and they can share. But we have, Virginia has a nice YouTube page where they have multiple short videos that folks have access to on a regular basis. Kentucky has a WIOA resources page with some state draft documents, but also links on the latest from WIOA and different resources that folks in the state can go and explore. And then Pennsylvania's Adult Ed Resources Program has multiple modules, again, that are short and bite-sized around WIOA. And so I just wanted to share some of these ideas as you're considering your training plan, thinking about how are you going to provide access to everybody and allow people the repetition that they need to really understand. So that being said, we're wondering who else, how do you store and share these materials? And you can select from the poll. And then if there's something else that you're doing that we didn't capture, either in YouTube, state site, or a newsletter, please go ahead and type it in the open chat pod. Okay, so we've got a lot of folks storing on the state site. Some are not currently sharing and hopefully getting some ideas as a way to store the multiple training materials that we know you're going to be developing or have already started developing. All right, great, thank you. So I think we will close the poll and begin to wrap up. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that on the NRF page, there is a link for resources for WIOA and NRF. So this page can also support you in your training development. It could be a link that you share with others. So what are the next steps here? Please look for that document of compiled training ideas and the page numbers and the material documents that we will be sending to you. And then you can go ahead and use that to recreate a training plan that includes your own timeline and you know which resources to use. Keep going. Continue training the folks in your state. And share your training successes or challenges with us. We always love to hear how you use the materials and what's going on in your state. So at the beginning, you took a little assessment, and we want to give you the same assessment to see how you're feeling now. But then also know that there's a chat pod at the bottom of that poll, so please go ahead and let us know what other resources will be helpful to you as you move forward in training your local providers on the NRF table changes in WIOA. Thank you, Sean. See a few people typing. So we're just going to give another few seconds. What other resource might be helpful to you as you move forward in your training of locals? Okay, thanks, Becky. So keeping in mind additional visuals to support some of this training, keeping current with other states. Great, I'm glad that the website is helpful as it's updated, Joanne. Thank you. Okay, we're going to close this pod page, but keep in mind the chat is still open, and we encourage you to keep adding your ideas. But I can turn it over to Larry, who will discuss the upcoming NRS support. Larry, are you on the call?
Amanda, he is, but he doesn't seem to have audio.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me just say that stay tuned for some upcoming webinars and tools that will be coming out, again, all with the intent and goal of supporting you in learning more about these changes and rolling them out to your state. As we always say, you do have the opportunity to receive individual technical assistance. If you need that, please do request it through Octave. The WIOA Performance Accountability Guidance is now available on NRS and Octave's WIOA page that you can see the link here. It's hyperlinked on the screen. You can go ahead to click on it. And the new NRS guidelines will be coming early in 2017. So with that, I am going to say thank you for your time. 2 hours is a long time, but you had a lot of productive moments and has come out with a nice product that we will be sharing with you very shortly. Please take just a few minutes to complete the evaluation. You can click on the screen, you can click on the icon, and when we close the webinar, you will get a reminder to please complete the evaluation. Again, your feedback is really important to us. So with that, are there any final questions or comments? I see some typing going on, so I'm going to pause.
And it looks like Terry just got back on, and he might want to say a concluding word.
Sure.
Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. I somehow got disconnected at the last minute, and I'm sorry for the technical problems we've had, but we'll be working on improving those. So anyway, I guess you already covered our future plans, which are to have additional webinars and face-to-face trainings. We're thinking of, on our drawing board now, is training on the guidelines when they're developed in the next couple of months. The new guidelines we'll be doing. There's some guidance already been out on accountability, joint guidance published by the Department of Labor jointly with Department of Ed, and I think you've all received that, or if you haven't, it's now available on both our website and the Octave WIOA page. We're also thinking of some training on the data validation and supplemental data guidance that will be coming out in the coming months, and also on data systems, particularly on users' experience on developing data systems, business rules and validation, and some of the basics for developing a new data system, which is going to be based on our targeted training, which is occurring in March. And later this summer, we will have another regional training, so stay tuned for that. So anyway, thank you all very much for participating, and Amanda, Marcella, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Larry. Yep, so with that, we just again want to say thank you, and please complete the evaluation, and we look forward to hearing what you do in the future. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.